Imagine being raised by the church, educated by bishops, baptized in Christian faith, then becoming Christianity's most dangerous enemy. In 361 AD, Julian the Apostate didn't just reject his faith, he launched the Roman Empire's final war against the cross. He had 18 months to erase Christianity from the earth. The church had 18 months to survive or die forever. His name was Julian, and history would remember him as the Apostate. Welcome to Legacy of the Holy Cross, where Orthodox faith, Byzantine history, and sacred tradition are brought to life for the modern believer. In 1453, the walls of Constantinople finally fell. But what if I told you the Byzantine Empire never truly died? Today, millions of Orthodox Christians carry its legacy without even knowing it. In the next 15 minutes, you'll discover hidden truths about your faith that will transform how you worship forever. Before we explore the sacred architecture that shaped Orthodox worship, claim your free Byzantine Heritage Guide. 7 symbols that transform how you experience divine liturgy. Click the link in the description. It's free and takes 30 seconds. The irony cuts deep. The man who would become Christianity's most sophisticated persecutor had once been groomed to be its champion. Julian's childhood was steeped in Christian teaching, his mind shaped by the theological giants of the 4th century. Yet within the corridors of power, a different kind of education was taking place. The old gods were calling, and Julian was listening. What happened next would test the very foundations of Christian faith in ways that even Diocletian's great persecution had not. This wasn't the crude brutality of earlier persecutions. This was intellectual warfare, cultural manipulation, and systematic oppression designed by someone who understood Christianity from the inside. Julian knew exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. But here's what makes this story truly remarkable. In just 20 months, from 361 to 363 AD, Julian's persecution would ultimately demonstrate something profound about the nature of faith itself. The harder he pressed, the stronger the church became. The more he restricted, the more resilient believers grew. This is the story of how authentic faith not only survives opposition, but transforms it into triumph. Let's begin with the man himself. Julian was born in 331 AD into the imperial family, nephew to Constantine the Great. His childhood was marked by tragedy and suspicion. When he was just 6 years old, his father and most of his male relatives were murdered in the political purges that followed Constantine's death. Only Julian and his half-brother Gallus survived, likely because they were considered too young to pose a threat. The imperial court decided that the safest place for these potentially dangerous children was within the Christian education system. Julian was sent to study under Bishop Eusebius of Nicomedia, one of the most influential Christian theologians of the time. Later, he would study under other Christian masters, learning rhetoric, philosophy, and theology. By all accounts, he was a brilliant student who excelled in Christian doctrine, but something was happening beneath the surface. Even as Julian memorized Christian texts and participated in Christian rituals, he was secretly exploring the forbidden world of pagan philosophy. He was particularly drawn to Neoplatonism, which offered a sophisticated intellectual framework for understanding the ancient gods. The works of Plotinus and Iamblichus became his secret passion, studied by lamplight when his Christian tutors thought he was sleeping. The transformation wasn't sudden. It was a gradual process of intellectual rebellion that culminated in a complete rejection of everything he had been taught. By the time Julian reached adulthood, he had become a practicing pagan, but he kept this conversion secret. He knew that revealing his true beliefs would mean death or exile. When Julian's half-brother Gallus was executed in 354 AD for incompetence and cruelty as Caesar, Julian found himself in an even more precarious position. The Emperor Constantius II was suspicious of all potential rivals, and Julian's survival depended on maintaining the appearance of Christian orthodoxy. He attended church services, participated in Christian festivals, and even received minor clerical orders, all while secretly practicing pagan rituals and building a network of fellow pagan intellectuals. What we just uncovered represents exactly why I spent 2 years researching and writing From Byzantium to Today, the philosophical bridge to modern Christianity. This isn't a typical ebook. It's an 80-page academic exploration featuring 13 comprehensive chapters full of reference material. From the Cappadocian Fathers to Byzantine legal codes that still influence modern law, from women's hidden influence in imperial Christianity to the philosophical exchanges between Byzantine and Islamic thinkers. This scholarly work connects every historical moment we discuss to your modern Orthodox faith. Church leaders, seminary students, and serious Orthodox scholars, consider this essential reading. Click the link in the description and get this valuable academic resource. The mask finally came off in 361 AD. When Constantius II died unexpectedly, Julian found himself the sole emperor of Rome. Within months, he had publicly declared his conversion to paganism and announced his intention to restore the old gods to their rightful place. The Christian establishment was stunned. They had nurtured and educated their own destroyer. Julian's persecution of Christians was unlike anything that had come before. Previous persecutions had been largely about public order and imperial authority. Julian's was deeply personal and intellectually sophisticated. He understood Christian theology well enough to attack it at its foundations. He knew Christian organizational structure well enough to dismantle it systematically. His first move was to remove Christians from positions of influence. Christian officials were dismissed from government posts. Christian teachers were banned from teaching classical literature, on the grounds that they couldn't honestly teach about the gods they didn't believe in. This was a devastating blow to Christian education and culture. But Julian's most insidious policy was his restoration of Jewish temple worship. He announced plans to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, not out of love for Judaism, but as a direct challenge to Christian theology. Christians believed that the temple's destruction in 70 AD was divine judgment and that Christ had replaced the temple system. Julian's plan was to prove Christianity wrong by rebuilding what Christians claimed could never be rebuilt. The persecution intensified as Julian's confidence grew. Churches were destroyed or converted to pagan temples. Christian symbols were removed from public buildings. The Chi-Rho monogram that had adorned imperial standards since Constantine was replaced with pagan symbols. Christian holidays were suppressed while pagan festivals were reinstated with great fanfare. Yet something remarkable began to happen. The more Julian oppressed Christians, the more unified they became. Divisions that had plagued the church for decades suddenly seemed less important when faced with a common enemy. Orthodox Christians, Arians, and other groups found themselves standing together against pagan persecution. The persecution also revealed the depth of Christian faith among ordinary people. When faced with the choice between comfortable apostasy and costly faithfulness, the vast majority chose faithfulness. Julian had expected that removing imperial patronage would cause Christianity to collapse. Instead, he discovered that the church's strength came not from imperial favor, but from the genuine devotion of its members. Christian courage during this period was extraordinary. They wore their faith like armor, knowing that their commitment to Christ was more valuable than imperial approval. This is the kind of courage that inspires us even today. The kind that reminds us that faith over empire isn't just a slogan, but a way of life. The Byzantine cross we see throughout Orthodox churches. You can wear this sacred symbol with our Byzantine cross collection. When you understand its meaning and wear it with reverence, you're carrying 1,500 years of Orthodox power. Click the link in the description. The persecution produced its share of martyrs, though not in the massive numbers of earlier persecutions. Julian was too sophisticated to create obvious martyrs who would rally Christian opposition. Instead, he preferred subtle pressure, economic discrimination, and social ostracism. But when Christians did face death for their faith, they met it with the same courage that had characterized Christian martyrs for 3 centuries. One of the most significant acts of resistance came from an unexpected source. In Antioch, where Julian had established his headquarters, the Christian population engaged in what we might call passive resistance. They refused to participate in pagan festivals, boycotted pagan merchants, and maintained their Christian practices despite official disapproval. Their quiet defiance infuriated Julian, who had expected his hometown to embrace his pagan revival. Julian's attempt to rebuild the Jerusalem temple became a symbol of the entire persecution's futility. Work began with great fanfare, but soon encountered mysterious setbacks. Earthquakes, fires, and other disasters plagued the construction. Whether these were natural coincidences or divine interventions, Christians saw them as confirmation that God's plan could not be thwarted by human schemes. The psychological warfare intensified as Julian's reign progressed. He wrote treatises attacking Christian doctrine, using his theological education to craft sophisticated arguments against the faith. He portrayed Christians as traitors to classical culture, enemies of reason, and destroyers of traditional values. His anti-Christian writings were distributed throughout the empire, creating an intellectual climate hostile to Christian belief. But Christians responded with their own literary campaign. Church fathers like Gregory of Nazianzus wrote powerful refutations of Julian's arguments, demonstrating that Christianity was not the enemy of reason, but its fulfillment. The persecution sparked a renaissance of Christian apologetics that strengthened the church's intellectual foundations. The end came suddenly and dramatically. In 363 AD, Julian launched a military campaign against Persia, partly to demonstrate that the old gods still favored Rome. The campaign was a disaster. Julian was killed in battle, possibly by a Christian soldier, though the exact circumstances remain mysterious. His dying words, according to legend, were, "You have conquered Galilean," a final acknowledgement of Christ's victory. Julian's death marked the end of paganism's last serious attempt to reclaim the Roman Empire. His successor, Jovian, immediately restored Christian privileges and ended the persecution. The church emerged from its trials stronger and more unified than before. The persecution's failure demonstrated several crucial truths about the nature of faith. First, authentic Christianity cannot be destroyed by external pressure. Second, persecution often purifies and strengthens the church by separating genuine believers from nominal ones. Third, the church's ultimate security lies not in imperial favor, but in divine protection. Julian's persecution also revealed the importance of intellectual preparation for spiritual warfare. Christians who had grounded their faith in solid theological understanding were better equipped to resist sophisticated attacks. Those who knew why they believed what they believed stood firm when others wavered. The period shaped Orthodox Christian understanding of persecution and resistance. It established patterns that would serve the church well in future trials. The emphasis on maintaining Christian community life, supporting suffering believers, and preserving Christian culture became hallmarks of Orthodox resilience. This ancient story speaks powerfully to modern Christians facing their own forms of persecution. The foundation of Christian empire isn't built on political power, but on faithful witness. Whether facing intellectual attacks, social pressure, or outright persecution, the key is maintaining confidence in Christ's ultimate victory. Julian's persecution teaches us that faith doesn't just survive opposition, it transforms it. Every attempt to destroy Christianity has ultimately made it stronger. Every Julian in history has discovered that the gates of hell cannot prevail against the church that Christ built. The story continues beyond Julian's death. The Christian empire he tried to destroy would flourish for another 1,000 years in Constantinople, carrying forward the ancient faith through countless trials. Each generation of Christians has faced its own Julian, its own test of faith over empire. Today, as Christians around the world face new forms of persecution, the lessons of Julian's reign remain relevant. The same courage that sustained 4th century Christians can sustain us. The same faith that triumphed over imperial opposition can triumph over contemporary challenges. As we close this chapter of Christian history, remember that Julian's story is ultimately not about persecution, but about victory. Not about imperial power, but about divine sovereignty. Not about human schemes, but about God's unstoppable plan. Subscribe to continue this incredible journey through Christian history, because even greater challenges awaited the Christian empire, and even greater triumphs were yet to come. Transform your Orthodox understanding today. Download your free guide now. Deepen your knowledge with our ebook From Byzantium to Today. And wear your faith with our Sacred Symbols collection. Your spiritual transformation starts with action.